Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Bible in Life podcast. My name is John Whitaker, and I am the creator and host of the Bible in Life. And if we have not met before, I am just glad you're here and want to say welcome to the Bible in Life. If you're a longtime listener of the Bible in Life podcast, then again, I'm just so grateful for you. Glad you're part of the Bible in Life family. So welcome to each and every one of you. On the Bible in Life, my heart, my goal is to try to provide what I like to call blue jeans theology. And what I mean by that is Bible teaching that is set in the context of everyday life, is explained in the language of everyday life, all aimed at helping you and I follow Jesus right in the midst of our everyday life. So that's our goal. That's our heart. And sometimes we do topics, sometimes we do book studies. And right now we are walking through just sort of at an applicational, kind of reflective sort of level, the book of Titus. And Titus is a short little book, originally a letter written from the Apostle Paul to one of his longtime colleagues in ministry, a man named Titus. And Titus was left by Paul on the island of Crete to get the churches fully set in order and established. And Paul had begun that ministry with Titus, has now since left, and has sent a letter both for Titus's benefit and for the church's benefit to hear some of the values and the priorities that ought to shape Titus's work and what happens in those churches. If you want like full detailed study, all the backstory, more kind of rigorous kind of academic detail on Titus, I would encourage you to listen to my study of Titus on the listener's commentary. Listener's commentary is where I just teach straight through Bible books, not as much application focus. It's more just to try to help you understand what the books are saying in their original context. So you can look up the listener's commentary and check it out there. Here, we're offering more reflections on that. And so I want to pick up after our last podcast. We looked at the introduction and greeting, and it was an extended one in Titus for various reasons. So I want to pick up in this episode on Titus chapter 1, verse 5. And after the introduction and greetings, here's what Paul says. He says, for this reason, so for all the things he said in the introduction and greetings, things we talked about in our last episode, things related to kind of those four key words we highlighted of faith, truth, godliness, and hope that are going to be themes through this letter. For that reason, for Paul's ministry and being all about those things, for this reason, he says to Titus, I left you in Crete, an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, the largest island in the Mediterranean, actually. And Paul and Titus had begun some ministry there, and now Titus has been left behind. And here's the reason he's been left: that you would set in order what remains. Like, okay, we got the churches started, but I need you to really get those things established and ordered, so that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders in every city as I directed you. And so one of the tasks that Paul has really commissioned Titus to take care of is to make sure that there are elders in every city. Elders were a familiar feature of kind of Jewish life that Paul grew up with. They were the people who oftentimes were like the kind of spiritual leaders and overseers, even of a small little village or a synagogue. And so Paul grew up with this idea. And so to appoint elders is essentially to appoint people to oversee and to take care of, provide leadership, care, provision, and protection and support in the churches. Now, why does that matter? Why does Paul want Titus to appoint elders in the churches on the island of Crete? It's not arbitrary and it's not random. It's actually quite necessary. So to illustrate why these elders are important, I want to jump back to a moment in Jesus' ministry in Matthew chapter 9. And at this point, Jesus has been traveling through all the villages of Galilee, and he has been healing diseases, teaching people, and his ministry has really expanded and grown. And here's what it says in Matthew chapter 9, verse 36. this verse helps us understand why appointing elders is necessary. Matthew 9:36 says, seeing the crowd. So as Jesus has been traveling around, now he looks out at these crowds that are flocking to him. And look what it says. Seeing the crowds, he, Jesus, felt compassion for them because they were distressed and downcast like sheep without a shepherd. So Jesus looks out over all these people, and they seem burdened, wearied, right? Heavy laden, downcast. And he says, they're like sheep without a shepherd. They have no shepherd. They have no one that's really providing good direction for them. There's no one that's leading them to green pastures. There's no one that's making sure they are protected from the enemies to human flourishing and well-being. They have no shepherd, and they're distressed and downcast. If you keep reading in the context, it says, and they're being scattered about, right? Like they're scattered like sheep without a shepherd to draw them together to provide and protect them. And what it illustrates there in Matthew chapter 9 in Jesus' ministry is that God's people need good shepherds. God's people need good shepherds. And in the Bible, leadership of whatever type, kings, village elders, whatever, in the Bible, consistently, leadership is equated with shepherding. That's the dominant image for what it means to be a leader in the Bible. And I think that's significant and important. So when it says they are like sheep without a shepherd here in Matthew 9, what Jesus is realizing is these people are people who have no shepherds. They have no good leaders. And the reason I think this imagery of shepherding is so important is I think we need to understand that the way we talk about leadership and the way Jesus thought about leadership and the way the Apostle Paul thought about leadership are different. Now, I did a whole podcast series on some things related to church leadership and organizational leadership. And it's not because organizational leadership is bad. It's just that organizational leadership, particularly in Western civilization, has different aims, different objectives, and different manners of operating than shepherds. And in the Bible, to be a leader is to be a shepherd. So I would suggest to us that shepherding is greater than leadership, at least leadership as we mean it in our culture, where you're a CEO, you're a competent organizational leader. Again, that's not bad. It's just we want to make sure as Christian leaders, whether it's in business or in the church, we want to make sure our values, our priorities, and our modes of operating as leaders reflects the biblical values, the biblical priorities, and the biblical modes of operating. And the imagery that's at the heart of that is being good shepherds that are among the sheep, that know the sheep, and that the sheep know them, and that provide for the sheep, and that protect the sheep. And so that's what Jesus is seeing in these crowds. They're like sheep without a shepherd. And that illustrates why Paul wants Titus to appoint elders in the churches in every town and city on the island of Crete. So they've got churches started in virtually every city on the island of Crete, but those churches now are at the point where we need some good shepherds in those churches. We need men who can serve as overseers and elders in each and every one of those churches. And so Titus is tasked with appointing elders. Why? Because whether it's on the island of Crete, whether it's in Galilee in Jesus' day, whether it's in our day, God's people need good shepherds. They need people to lead them. They need people to be good examples for them of what, like concrete patterns of discipleship to Jesus. They need people with wisdom who could help sort out some of the difficulties of life. They need people who can protect them from falsehood, from error, and from all the waves of ideas and notions that batter people in our world today, people need good shepherds. They just do. And so for this reason, Paul says, I left you, Titus, in Crete, that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders in every city as I directed you. And then Paul goes into sort of a description of what are these elders? What are these good shepherds that the people need? What are they going to look like? And the first thing he says in verse 6 is, if any man is above reproach. And that in a lot of ways seems to be like the big category. Like if they're above reproach. In fact, that's going to get stated again in verse 7. An overseer must be beyond reproach. That's like the big category. They need to be the kind of people to whom, yes, they may get accused of things because of people's hostility and maliciousness, but those accusations don't stick because these are the kind of people who are beyond reproach. So if any man is beyond reproach, it's the first thing he says about these elders and overseers, these good shepherds. And then he says, the husband of one wife. So it's a man who is a one-woman man, literally. He is loyal, faithful to his wife. Having children who believe, not accused of indecent behavior or rebellion. Notice that the first place Paul goes to kind of give some direction for the kind of people to put in place is the household. Now, their households were different than our households in the sense that they were larger operations and there was more management responsibilities required. But nevertheless, Paul highlights faithfulness to his wife and children who are believers and who have a good reputation, not accused of indecent behavior or rebellion. Like respectable children who have a good reputation, even adult children, right? Why does Paul start with the household? And even in the list in 1 Timothy, Paul mentions the household. Why? Because the church is viewed as a family. It's the family of God. And the family provides an opportunity to test a person's both character and shepherding skills. Do you have the ability to shepherd a household? Do you have the ability to love and care for your wife? Do you have the ability to shepherd your children? Can you do so in such a way that faithfully leads them towards Jesus and helps them become good human beings, right? It's a testing ground. It's a picture. It's an opportunity to see, is this person the kind of person that could extend his shepherding skills from his own household into the household of God? He goes on in verse 7 and says that the overseer must, again, be beyond reproach, that big category, as God's steward. Maybe we miss it, but when he says as God's steward, it's the idea of as God's manager. Like God's the owner of the household. Elders, overseers, the idea of, notice, point elders, the overseer, those two words overlap. Sometimes the word in older translations, the word overseer is translated bishop. I think it's important to realize that confuses us because of church history and later church structure. The overseer is an elder and the elder is an overseer. They're the same thing. The bishop is an elder. The elder is a bishop. It's the same thing. These words are used interchangeably here. And the idea of overseer is one who looks over, watches over, provides guidance and care, protection and provision. That's the idea. That's what elders are supposed to do. As God's steward, that is, as like the manager of the household. That's the idea. That's the picture from Paul's world. So they are managers in God's household. And then Paul goes on and gives some more descriptions of the kind of people, not self-willed. They're not out there serving themselves. They're not out there for what they can get out of it. They're not out there for their own gain, not quick-tempered. They don't get angry easily, right? They don't just fly off the handle super quick. Not indulging in wine, right? Literally, it's not about the wine, not about the wine table. They're not somebody who's just constantly drinking. Not a bully, right? Not aggressive and malicious or, combative. None of that. Not greedy for money. Like they're not in it to get rich. They're not constantly looking how they can make more. But instead of those things, hospitable. They have a hospitable environment, a hospitable demeanor. They welcome people into their life, welcome people into their home. They're hospitable, loving what is good. I mean, just take that phrase and reflect on it. That should describe all of our lives, right? Loving what is good. We love the good. We love God's things and the things that are beautiful and right and good, wherever we find it in the world. Loving the good. Self-controlled. They have their life under control. They're self-disciplined and self-controlled. Righteous, holy. Holy has this idea here as devout, living before the face of God, living a Godward kind of life. Holy, disciplined, holding. Then he goes on to kind of their faithfulness to the truth about Jesus, holding firmly to the faithful word, which is in accordance with the teaching. That is the teaching about Jesus, the teaching that Paul offered. That these are men who hold faithfully to the word of truth about Jesus, so that for the goal or purpose that he'll be able to both exhort in sound doctrine and refute those who contradict it. That they will be able to teach and encourage and exhort people, equip people to live out the teaching of Jesus and refute people who contradict it. So they need to know this stuff, hold it faithfully, hold it tightly, so that they're able to pass on the truth and correct those who err. Now, that's the description of these good shepherds that Paul wants Titus to appoint in the churches. And once again, the reason why that's so important is because people need good shepherds. They need godly, wise, caring, self-giving shepherds. People among them who embody the truth about Jesus, can teach and instruct the truth about Jesus, and help provide a concrete example of what it looks like to follow Jesus. That's what they need, because people are distressed and downcast, confused and lost, battered by so many ideas and so many issues in life, battered by difficulties and hardship, opinions, and in our day and age, right, with social media and the 24-hour news cycle, just so much stuff where it's like we need people who can help us stay focused on what really matters and help us wisely learn and live God's way, Jesus' way in the world. People need good shepherds. They needed it then, they need it today. And the reality is, even though this description is for elders, it's a description of the kind of people that disciples should be seeking to become, so that they too can be helpful to the world, good for the world, because they are not living for themselves. They're not greedy for money, but they're loving and hospitable, and they love the good, right? They're righteous. They live Godward lives. Like people like that are good for the world. They're good for the church. And if we would all pursue that, we as the church might actually have more credibility in the world. And that's one of the things Paul's going to be concerned with in the book of Titus is how could we live together as God's people in such a way, the phrase he'll use is that we adorn the doctrine of God, that we make beautiful the teaching about Jesus, that we make beautiful God's ways. Well, having these kinds of leaders is a critical piece in being a congregation that is growing in wisdom and growing in God's ways. That's what a good shepherd is. Good shepherd is among the sheep, leading them to green pastures, protecting them from the enemies about them, and ultimately, the ultimate good shepherd, Jesus himself, lays down his life for the sheep. John 10:11, right? I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. And the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And so in imitating Jesus, not in like going to the cross or dying necessarily for the sheep, but laying down our life so that we're serving the sheep, we're among the sheep, we're caring for the sheep, we're guiding the sheep, we're protecting the sheep, we're teaching the sheep, right? That's a good shepherd. And that's the picture we have here in Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. God's people need good shepherds. May all of us who want to faithfully serve God look at this example that's described here and maybe let that be sort of like a pattern for us. I want those kind of character traits to be true of me, so that in whatever way I could be helpful and useful to God's people, let it be so. Not because we have a title, whether we ever have a title elder or overseer, it doesn't really matter. The title is not nearly as important. The important thing is becoming the kind of person that can help God's people live godly lives in an ungodly world. That's what we're after by being good shepherds. All right, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Bible in Life podcast. As always, this podcast, the listener's commentary, the entire online Bible and Life ministry is only possible because so many people give faithfully and generously to support this ministry. So thank you so much for supporting this ministry, whether that's through signing up for the online courses as a way to support this ministry, whether it's through a monthly donation through World Family Mission, whatever way it is. Thank you for your faithful, generous support. Thanks for your prayers. May God bless you for it. And may all of us together continue to faithfully walk with Jesus, that we might increasingly embody His way, the way of the Good Shepherd, in our world. God bless you guys. I look forward to talking with you again next week.